Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens for your Leeds United 0, Sunderland 1 closing whistle. And this is the show where we kind of go into more detail. Obviously last night, if you did miss it, we did do an instant match reaction and that was like the emotion of the moment. Whereas this is a much more of a deep dive into Leeds United and actually how they got on last night and why it went wrong. But mainly what I want to focus on this video is more what have we learned from last night? Because I think recently, truthfully, we've had so many good results over such a strong period of time that there hasn't been much learnings to do. Obviously, you want to learn on everything, but there hasn't been such obvious learnings to do. But I do think last night there was some clear learnings. And I want to get into our creativity problem, potential solutions for there. I want to look at sort of, did Daniel Farke start in the wrong way? Did he make the wrong substitutions? The game analysis in general. And I also want to talk about the referee as well, because I do think, regardless of the penalties, I want to go back on something I said about a penalty on Struijk as well. So I want to talk a bit about all of that really. But obviously if you could help the channel by dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff does massively help the channel as I quest towards 2,000 subscribers, and also giving me a bit of a boost, you know, with Leeds United being fairly crap last night. But I want to start first of all talking about the big picture. Where are Leeds at the moment? Because I think obviously yesterday it was quite a negative review because the game was bad, and the whole point of that review and that conversation was about that, and it was about the fact that we were looking at the game in isolation. We weren't looking at the rest of the season. But the truth of the matter is that we knew this season wouldn't be plain sailing for Leeds United. And actually, other than the wobble we had at the start of the season, in the actual end of the season, which is where we are now, in the sort of final quarter of the season, we've actually been quite unscathed for a long period of time. We've played really well. We've put out consistent performances. We've never been massively, like, fully dragged into relegation battle where we're, like, 1 or 2 points ahead of maybe a West Ham or Forest. We've always had this slight cushion. And I think it has been, truthfully, pretty sort of plain sailing since, really, around sort of the Christmas period for Leeds United. And that is something we've got to bear in mind. Because, truthfully, I never thought it was going to be like that for the rest of the season. I did think at some point it might get a bit worse for us. And I think right now we're probably in that stage where it might get a bit worse. Obviously, context applies on that as well in terms of, obviously today we do have West Ham playing Forest. Somebody might watch this after these games have happened. But we do have West Ham versus Forest, and obviously we have West Ham versus Fulham, and obviously Forest playing away at the Emirates, at the Etihad, of course. So them two teams lose, and actually Leeds United is still in a really good position. And again, that seems important. And also, I think one thing that we haven't discussed enough is we haven't really played a game like that all season, really, especially in the Premier League, where we're basically playing an opposition who are coming to Elland Road, and they're happy actually leaving Elland Road with a 0-0. Most teams that come to Elland Road naturally, because we're a newly promoted team and because they see there's basically as an option for points, come to Elland Road thinking, we want to come here and get 3 points. And that's what majority of teams do. We haven't really seen a team come to Elland Road and being so negative, probably since the Championship. And I think Leeds United and maybe Daniel Farke was quite surprised, actually, at the Sunderland approach and how probably going into the game, how negative they were. And it's not on a Sunderland thing. Look, they played their own way and they got the result, and fair play to them. But they did. I don't think Daniel Farke was expecting a game where Sunderland come that deep. And maybe that's an oversight before going into the game, a mistake on his behalf. But I think the lineup suggested that he probably didn't think that. I think the lineup was a mistake if we want to get into that as well. I think looking back, look, I know why he picked the lineup, and I think people saying they don't understand the lineup and etc. I get the lineup. I think it was obviously quite a risk-averse lineup, and he was kind of hoping that if we're in the game, eventually, we've got a pretty good record this season of scoring goals, we'll probably score a goal, and with that team, we probably won't concede with the way Sunderland may be going to set up. So I could understand what he was trying to do. But for me, the issue with Daniel Farke sometimes is I can understand it pre-game, but then when it becomes completely apparent in-game that isn't working, I do feel, and this has been a situation with Farke, and probably his biggest criticism for me of everything that he does, it is the fact that I don't think he changes quick enough in games. Even yesterday, you could have changed it on the 30th minute. You could have just gone, I was wrong, I don't need this. The way Sunderland are playing, I can see from moment one, the time wasting, they're going down for cheap fouls, they're wasting time, they're playing in a certain way, they're playing for 0-0. I now don't need Gruev in the midfield anymore. And it's not a knock on Gruev, he's been good this season, but we didn't need him for that game last night. And I think some managers, some maybe managers who are more against risk, or less risk averse as such, would have gone, right, fine, Gruev off, Nonto on, and we'll go for it from there. Because as I said, I can understand it from Daniel Farke's point of view in terms of before the game, because we could look on another day, we could have scored a goal and we could have won the game, but for me, it was just totally apparent. Even in my notes last night, I had from 30 minutes on, from 30 minutes, I put, this is rubbish on 30 minutes and we're not creating anything. And it never really changed. And I just think sometimes Daniel Farke waits for it to happen. And I think as a manager, sometimes in this division especially, you've got to force the issue. You've got to go, well, this might get us over the line, but I think we've had a higher chance of Nonto coming on and then having more chance of winning the game. And maybe it wasn't Nonto the situation, but he was the obvious one. Because I think, important to note, and I did say it on the stream last night, I do think had Okafor been available, we've seen like-minded games so far for Leeds United, e.g. the Forest game as an example, and he did start Okafor up front with sort of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. That was the play he started, and I had Okafor been fit tonight, he would have definitely started this game, but it was one of them situations where we had a bit of a winning formula and he didn't want to go against it, which, as I said, I do get, but when it's so apparent so quick that there's a problem there, I do think sometimes he's got to work on changing the game quicker, because at least it should have been half-time at least. And I don't quite know what he's waiting for, because we weren't going to see anything different from Sunderland. Maybe Xhaka coming on, he thought maybe would have made a difference, but truthfully, with the way they were set up in a negative manner, in a low block, real low block structure, we needed that quick. We needed not to give the creative players as much time as possible to try break down what was a really, really well drilled, structured low block performance from Sunderland, and I don't think we did that quick enough. And I said we haven't seen that, and we haven't seen this problem this season because teams don't do that. But last season we saw it a few times. I said on the stream last night actually that it was quite a similar game to the Burnley game last season where we lost 1-0 at home as well. Koleosho scored early on, I think about the 30th minute from a mistake from Solomon, and he slipped. Then they went through and scored, and we basically just resorted to putting loads of balls in the box. Didn't really create an awful lot, and that was an issue. And obviously we came out losing the game, and it was the same last night really. And that takes me into the creativity problem, because I think we've talked about obviously that Daniel Farke could have changed the creativity problem, and that's true, but the other point that we've got with this, and this is something I've said on the channel for a while, and I think it was apparent last night in that structure, is that we don't have enough good creators at the football club. And when we're looking at, so hopefully Leeds United survive this season, and if we do survive this season, the number one priority for me in the summer transfer window, we can talk about strikers, all this, we need more creators. Because if you're going to progress as a football club and you're going to be a better team going forward and better than we've been this season and out of a relegation battle, you've got to play teams like that at home more and more. That's going to become a more regular occurrence. The better you become, the more teams that are going to come to Elland Road trying to play for a 0-0. And if you're going to do that and beat them teams, you're going to have creators in the team and more creators. And I think we do lack that. The one thing that annoys me as well about the creative situation is we actually brought one in January. Now, I know he stunk it out away at Birmingham. I get that. But he is a player that in a game like that could have come up with a moment that opened up the game. And we only need one, because for the majority of the game, until the 70th minute, it was 0-0. And we only need one moment. And I look at Buonanotte, and it's a shame he played so badly against Birmingham. Because I think had he not done, he might have been on the bench tonight, or last night, should I say. And it might have therefore been able to get on the ball and actually play in this game, which he obviously wasn't able to do. A Sunderland fan says Sunderland didn't sit back all game. It was the last 10 minutes when we high press on Hughes most of the game. We didn't come at Leeds and try play for a point. Remember, you only had 4 shots. A few things with that, mate. We had 18 shots in the game. You had 3. So it's just look. There's nothing wrong with doing what you did last night. Fair play. You won the game. But if you watch the game, in my opinion, it was blatantly clear from minute 1 that you were playing for a draw. Why would you time waste otherwise? If you were winning the game, fine, time waste. You were drawing the game 0-0 and you were time wasting. So I get your point, and I know you'd be frustrated that I'm coming on saying that because it don't give Sunderland enough credit. I get that, but I don't know what to say because that's the game I watched, and that's what we do on this channel. But fair enough, you have your opinion. Clive says it's Farke who played for a draw. I don't think he did. I think he wanted to win the game, and I think if you look at the substitutions that we made, I do think it was obvious that we were trying to win the game. And truthfully, if you look through like the notebook at the start of the season and went, which games are we trying to win? Probably Sunderland at home was probably going to be a target game for a win. And we know Daniel Farke does that in terms of, I remember the Man United game when he came out after the game and said that we targeted this game actually as a win for us and we were quite disappointed with the draw. And obviously it was a similar sort of situation last night in terms of that would have been a target for it. 4 shots at our goal and 18 missed shots. Yeah, well, we missed a load of chances, and that's part of the creativity, mate. You defended well. There was nothing wrong with your defensive performance. You were fantastic, and you stopped all the space, stopped us playing through, and stopped us creating stuff, and actually limited us to putting balls, just random balls, hopeful balls into the box, and hoping something fell for us. That was the situation, but that's down to your defensive approach. But it's also down to how well structured your defensive approach is, because I think the obvious thing that people are going to say after last night is, and I said it myself, is that Wolves and Burnley are also going to come and play that exact same sort of structure in terms of going to try soak it up, try time waste from the start, and try slow the game down and come for a 0-0. That is exactly what Wolves and Burnley, in my opinion, are going to try do, and that is a worry when you watch last night. And are we going to see a similar performance in the Wolves game and the Burnley game, and therefore not win them games? However, what I will say on top of that is that Sunderland are better at doing that than Burnley and Wolves. They're a better team, and their defensive structure last night was really good. As I said, this isn't a knock on Sunderland, but this is a talk from a Leeds point of view in the game. It's not there's fantastic Sunderland channels out there who will talk all more about Sunderland, but that's just the way I saw it. I'm seeing it through a Leeds lens, naturally, hence the name of the video of the challenge, I say. Clive says Farke set a target of a point per game, and we draw most games even when we're on top. Farke is scared to lose. I know what you're saying, and I think I can get your logic behind it. We were targeting a point a game at the start of the season. It was mentioned a lot of times, so that is true categorically. However, that I thought that, for me personally, I thought that was the aim this season. The aim at the start of the season was to stay in the Premier League. That is what every newly promoted club does when they get promoted. If any of the when teams get promoted next season, if it's Coventry, Middlesbrough, all these teams, their target next season will be to stay in the Premier League. That will be their aim. And we're no different from Sunderland, who have actually progressed much better than we have, and obviously now 9 points clear of us, and are going to be the team that have got the most points of a newly promoted time this season for sure now. But their aim at the start of the season as well was to stay in the league. So the fact of the matter is, yes, you're right that a point per game was the target, but that's always been the target, and that will be the target for the teams next year as well. It is. So anyway, but yeah, back to the creation stuff, because part of when we talked about and sort of SCFC was correct in terms of we did have 18 shots, but what was important last night with the 18 shots, and this goes back into the creativity, is we actually had 0 big chances. We didn't actually create a quote unquote big chance in the game. And that, again, is worrying because, obviously, like I said, hopefully Burnley and Wolves are not as good structurally as Sunderland in terms of the way they play, and they're not, because they haven't got a good centre-backs naturally as Sunderland have. Because, to be fair, Sunderland centre-backs were fantastic last night. But in the same breath, it does slightly worry you, though, that we have that much of the ball in the game, and we still can't create anything really meaningful in the whole game. That is a concern going forward, 100%. That is a concern. Bielsa wasn't scared to lose, and we won 18 games. Yeah, but Bielsa's a better manager than Daniel Farke. That don't mean Daniel Farke is not right for the job. It just means that Bielsa was a better coach, and he was. But our position is still under threat. Yeah, it is. Leeds will stop anyway, so it's all good. Leeds will stop anyway, so it's all good. I'm not sure what you mean. 38 points might not be enough. No, it might not be this season, but at the start of the season, a lot of people would have said, if you get a point per game, we'll be happy with that. Because everyone targets 40 points, don't they, really? And obviously, 38 points is 2 less. You play the season you're in. Yeah, we do, but we weren't playing that from the start of the season. And as I said, I thought last night he felt that we would, if we completely nullified Sunderland in terms of an attacking threat, which we did outside of the penalty, which was just a mistake, and it wasn't a structural problem from us. I do think we stopped a lot of what Sunderland did in an attacking sense, but I don't think they were trying to attack loads. So that's kind of the sort of counter argument to it. The other thing I wanted to say in terms of creativity, though, which I haven't seen mentioned, is the 5 at the back for Leeds has been fantastic this season. Since we've changed to it, it's revolutionised our season. Without it, we'd probably now relegated in the Championship. In truth, that's probably what that has been how good the 5 at the back has for us. But when we're playing a game like that, do we need to play 5 at the back? Like, when it's abundantly clear early on that Sunderland are going to play in the way they approach the game, do we need to play with 5 defenders in the team? Like, I remember watching Man United versus Everton early in the season, and they got massively criticised for this. They lost the game 1-0, and they were playing 10 men, which Sunderland weren't playing with 10 men last night. But they basically sit in camped And Man United kept the back five on the whole time with the three centre-backs. Did we need to do that last night? Did we? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we did, if I'm being totally honest. And I think that was a mistake. But as I said, I think and we need to find a way. Hopefully, Buonanotte is a good game against Norwich, and he can be involved in the season going forward in a bit more detail. Hopefully, Nonto can have a good game against Norwich, and he can be involved more in the season as well. Because if we haven't got Okafor, we're going to need other creators in the team. And hopefully, as I said, we can adapt a bit more. Because I remember the Sunderland away game. That's the only game since, I believe, at the end of November, when obviously we changed it. That of course that's the only game that we played into back. We actually went into a back four, because we went in the back four the second half against Sunderland. It was a shame we didn't try something like that differently. But we also weren't losing the game, so I think that's why he didn't shift it. Last week we were going for Europe, and now we're getting relegated. Us Leeds forecast so. I've never said we're going for Europe, mate. I've never said that once, if I'm being honest. Maybe some fans were. I've never said that. I don't now think we're getting relegated either. I think this is a stump in the road. I think if we were to lose the next two, or maybe get 1 point from the next two games, we're going to have to start having some more dour conversations, especially depending on how the other teams get on naturally. But I don't think we're now relegated. I just think this is a bit of a bump in the road, which is going to happen. As I said at the start, it's not going to be plain sailing. It was never going to be plain sailing, but that's what it is. You surely don't want Farke next season now. Well, if we go down, then no, because he hasn't completed his objective. If he keeps in the Premier League, then I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with it. He's completed his objective, which at the start of the season, that was the objective. I also think with Daniel Farke, in my opinion, which I don't think he gets credit for enough, it's obvious, because and everyone knows this, and everyone gives him credit for that. Daniel Farke was involved in the recruitment, and everybody talks about the recruitment being fantastic at Leeds. And we've got a really good squad apparently, and the recruitment's fantastic. Well, Daniel Farke's influential in the recruitment of Leeds United, so he never gets enough credit for his recruitment, in my personal opinion, either. Learn, get rid of Farke. He's a coward. I don't want coward. Oh, brilliant, nice. Sunderland have too many. No, I'm not reading that one. Yeah. Also, I think Perot's a bit of an issue as well. I've written down my notes. I think that's obvious now. I can't see how he has a future at Leeds, if I'm being totally honest. Especially if we're in the Premier League, which hopefully we will be. As I said, I don't think it's over yet. But I think he's someone that's has got to sort of have a he's got someone that's got to move on in the summer, really, isn't it? What else do I want to talk about? I wanted to talk about the referee, didn't I? Because I came on last night and I said that the referee was awful in the game for a number of reasons. But the main reason I was annoyed with him last night is I just don't feel like he, in any part of the game, let the game flow. Apparently, there was no point, I believe, yesterday when the game went on for more than 2 minutes without there being a foul, a throw-in. Obviously, you can't affect throw-ins, but the fouls, the average amount of fouls I heard on the Square Ball this morning is something like 20.6. And last night there was 33 fouls in the game, and it felt like that, didn't it? It was what, 50% more than 50% more than the average for fouls in a game, and that was so obvious because it was just so stop and start, and a lot of them fouls were really weak, nothing fouls. And what annoys me when they give them is they continue to give them. And what I think should have been the case is they shouldn't have been giving so many fouls, and players will stop diving if they're not getting the decisions. So it would lead to less fouls being given if you let a few go. And he just didn't do that, and he completely bought into Leeds giving. He gave us loads of cheap fouls, he gave Sunderland a load of cheap fouls, but it just didn't help the game, and it made the spectacle of the game truly awful. And the other thing that I want to say with last night as well in terms of referee is, I said last night that the Struijk one wasn't a penalty. I didn't think. Having watched it back, I do now think it's a penalty. I'd only seen it at the time. I hadn't seen like the replays of it. I don't know how I've somehow missed it, but because I watched it on TNT, I don't quite know how I missed it. But it was a penalty, that, and that would have again changed the game, because truthfully, had we gone 1-0 up in that game with the team that we had on the pitch, I think we would have gone on to win the game. So these are important moments in the game. They really are. And the penalty situation is just it's so frustrating. I think people are already annoyed, obviously, naturally, with the Man City situation with the referee there, where there was a Mateus Nunes sort of elbow, that sort of handball sort of situation that wasn't given as well. And that game was refereed, in my opinion, in general, quite poorly. And again, that's now 2 on the trot when the refereeing has just been not good enough, in my opinion. So yeah, we are. That was not a penalty in a million years for Sunderland. It was definitely a penalty. It's that yesterday is most obvious penalty I've seen from handball in a long time. It's just complete and utter deliberate handball. Ampadu sees their player coming at him, and he basically just knocks the ball with his hand to get the ball away from their attacker. It's the most deliberate handball I've ever seen in my life. It's 100% a penalty, 100%. But yeah, overall, to sort of wrap up the show, I kind of want to. I think where I'm at with it, and maybe you guys are different to this, I don't think we're in quote-unquote panic time anymore. I don't think we are. I don't think we're in panic mode yet, and I don't think we need to be. And this is the first sort of test Leeds United have had now where they've played a game at home that they should have been winning, and it hasn't quite happened for us for a number of reasons. So I do think that. I do think that we've got to just stay a bit calm now, and there's lessons to be learned. And what I don't want to see now is when we've got more winnable home games, I don't want to see that same team again. That's when I definitely will criticise Farke, because if we play Wolves at home and Burnley at home, and we play that sort of 11 where we've got the 3 midfielders and we're playing with a 5 back, I don't think that's good enough, because you've seen now that there's a situation where that doesn't work, and I think we've got to now learn from that and sort of improve from that. So that's what I want to see now. But it's going to be how the team respond, because I don't think the team. We've talked about Farke and individual, but the team wasn't good enough last night. Like, a lot of them played poorly. Now you can talk about the lack of rest that they've had, and obviously the turnaround period. But it's similar for Sunderland. They had to travel all the way to Bournemouth, then they had to come to Leeds. We played a few hours later on the Saturday, but truthfully, it was about the same time especially when you put in the miles that they've had to travel as well, Sunderland. So I don't think there was a massive excuse in that, but they did look a bit leggy out there. And it actually reminded me, when we actually drew this game. We played Chelsea on the Wednesday night, and we played Liverpool on the Saturday. I don't know if people remember, but the first half of that Liverpool game, we lacked all intensity, and we looked knackered, and we made a few subs. I think Tanaka came on the pitch, Nonto came on the pitch, and it sort of freshened it up a bit. I thought we saw the same last night. I know it was a slightly different game state in terms of we didn't draw the game 3-0, we didn't score as many goals, but I thought it was similar in terms of the lack of the lack of intensity that we had in the game was similar, and it reminded me of that game, because I remember the two different comparisons. Like the Chelsea game, we came out of the box flying, and the Liverpool game was just a bit slower, and it was sort of just, you could tell, a bit more knackered. And I thought we saw the same, because we did put a lot into that City game at the weekend, which obviously we came out with nothing with. Anyway, thanks all for watching as always. I will see you this evening, because I'm going to do a video, kind of like a match reaction video to when Forest and West Ham play at they play at 7:30 tonight. So there'll be like a match reaction and talk about sort of a relegation update from how their results getting on. Hopefully, them results can go in our way, and it won't have been too horrendous. Like, if they both lose, truthfully, we are as we are. Still 6 points left with 9 games remaining, and all will be golden. I do think there is a chance that West Ham gets something at Fulham for sure. I don't see Forest getting anything at Man City, but I could be wrong. Anyway, thanks all for watching as always, and I will see you tonight at about 9:30 when we talk about the relegation battle. See you then, everybody. Bye for now.